Happy Thanksgiving, and welcome to 21st Sports recap and reaction for the Chicago Bears at the Green Bay Packers in their Week 12 matchup played November 26, 2015. And this one was a cold, rainy night, but it had been a cold, rainy day leading into this night as the rain was coming down there in Green Bay, in Wisconsin. And at halftime, Brett Favre was honored and put into the Ring of Fame as they unveiled his number and his name, and he gave a little speech thanking the fans there in Green Bay and saying that Lambeau Field was the greatest place to play football. And heading into this game, Jay Cutler had never won a game in Lambeau Field, 0 for 4 as a Bears starter there against the Packers. They said it was wet, it was raining. As Favre even mentioned at halftime, that was Green Bay weather. Although in this game, it would end up playing out in the Bears' favor. But we're going to go over the scores, and we're going to go over the stats, and we're going to give our breakdown and analysis for this game. And starting right off in the beginning of the game, the first possession of the game for Green Bay resulted in a turnover on downs. And that kind of would really capsulize how this game was going to go for the Packers on offense anyway. Their defense was playing good. They were holding the Bears to 3 and outs, and they held them on to 3 and outs in their first 3 possessions of this game. And after the second time holding them to a 3 and out, the Packers would actually get on the scoreboard, and that was with about 5.5 minutes left in the first quarter. Aaron Rodgers hit Eddie Lacy, who took it into the end zone on a 25-yard reception, and he was able to get in there for the score. Mason Crosby added the extra point, and it was 7-0 Packers over the Bears. So that was the only score in the first quarter, and then the Bears would end up on the scoreboard in the second quarter, about 6 minutes before halftime, as Jay Cutler found Zach Miller for a 3-yard touchdown. Gould added the extra point, and this game was tied up at 7 apiece. Zach Miller's been making a resurgence in the last few weeks after having not scored a touchdown since 2011. Just in the past few weeks, he's been getting into the end zone as Cutler seems to have found a new favorite target. The Packers would end up taking back the lead, though, just before the 2-minute warning in the second quarter when Mason Crosby hit a 22-yard field goal, and that made it 10-7 with the Packers back up. But then with half a minute left before halftime, Jeremy Langford would score on a 1-yard touchdown run as he punched it into the end zone. Gould would add the extra point, and now Chicago was in the lead for the first time in this game with the score 14-10. But the Packers, they only had half a minute, and they go all the way down to field goal range, and Mason Crosby kicks a 50-yard field goal with just seconds left on the clock in the first half to make it a 1-point game. So it was 14-13 at halftime, with Chicago narrowly in the lead. So it's good defense on both sides, though, other than that last minute where we saw both teams get on the board in the final 30 seconds, and even 3 scores in the final 2 minutes of the first half, with, of course, 2 field goals by the Packers, sandwiching that touchdown by the Bears by Langford. But in the third quarter, these two teams would be scoreless as the defense really clamped down, and then early in the fourth, the Bears would get back on the scoreboard as they would extend their lead to 4 with a 21-yard field goal by Robbie Gould, and that was with a little over 12 minutes still left to play, as the Bears got all the way down to the 1-yard line, but on second and goal, Forte lost a pair, and so then an incomplete pass would bring out the kicker. So the 21-yard field goal made it 17-13, but still plenty of time left on the clock. But both teams would trade punts on their next possessions, and then Green Bay took over with just over 4 minutes left to play in this game, still down by 4. But on 1st and 10 from the 50, Aaron Rodgers was intercepted by Terry Porter. And earlier in the game, Porter had an interception, but that was overturned because of a pass interference call. but he comes up with the pick here. And so now, with 3.5 minutes still left to play, the Bears would take over. It was just under 3.5 left to play, but the Packers still had their timeouts. They would burn their 3 timeouts, and they would stop the clock, and they would force the Bears to punt and go 3 and out on this possession, so they would get one more chance. So they got the ball back. They had it on their own 20 with less than 3 minutes left to play. Is just over half a minute actually burned off the clock on that possession for Chicago. But so the Packers with the ball on their own 20, and they started moving the ball on a 2nd and 10. Rodgers went to Starks. He picked up 18 yards. That brought it to the 38. And then they ended up on a 2nd and 6 from the 42 after having picked up 4 yards on a pass. Starks, and that was to Perillo, but Starks picked up 7 on the ground. And so that brought it to the 2-minute warning. So now it was a 1st and 10 at the Green Bay 49. And then an incomplete pass brought up 2nd down. Rodgers went to Cobb. He picked up 32 yards. He was able to get out of bounds at the Chicago 19 as he had brought the ball down to the red zone. Rodgers then went to Starks. He picked up 3 yards. Then an incomplete pass would bring up 3rd and 7 from the Chicago 16. Rodgers hit Devontae Adams. He picked up 8 yards. Porter was there with the tackle, so he was having a huge game. So now it was 1st and goal on the Chicago 8. And then an incomplete pass brought up 2nd down. And another incomplete pass brought up 3rd down. So now 3rd and goal on the 8. Rodgers goes to James Jones. It looks like a touchdown, but Porter smacks it out of his hands. As Terry Porter was really having a big game on defense for the Bears. And so now it was 4th and 8, 4th and goal from the 8. The final play for the Packers in this game. If they did not get a touchdown, they would turn the ball over on downs, and there was no chance of a 1st down. And an incomplete pass. He was looking for Adams, but the defense broke it up. And, I guess you could make your arguments whether that was pass interference there. I don't even know what pass interference is nowadays because it seems like it changes from play to play. I don't know if you have your arms wrapped around a guy, maybe that's pass interference. It was more than 5 yards from, the line of scrimmage. I know you can contact a guy within the first 5 yards. You're allowed to do that, but the line of scrimmage was the 8-yard line, and they were in the back of the end zone, but I guess it wasn't pass interference because it was not called, although earlier in the game, when Porter got called for pass interference when he had that interception, I didn't really think he had interfered then, and that ended up in a touchdown, the first touchdown of the game for the Packers. So I guess, that's just kind of how things go, that, a call at one point that goes your way, then another call doesn't go your way, or vice versa. And the Chicago Bears end up holding on to win this one, 17-13. Cutler finally gets a win in Lambeau Field, and the Packers now lose their 4th game of the season, their 2nd game at Lambeau. They're now 7-4, and then technically at the moment they're actually half a game behind the Packers, who will be facing the Falcons on Sunday in Atlanta. And the Bears are now 5-6, and they actually are 4-2 on the road. The Packers 4-2 at home on the season. So the Bears, they're not quite out of it just yet in terms of they have still a mathematical chance at potentially getting a wild card, even a very long shot at maybe even winning the division. I know that sounds crazy, but it's mathematically possible. As it stands now, they're 2 games behind the Packers, 2.5 behind Minnesota, as Minnesota's yet to play, as I just stated a moment earlier. And if the Vikings lose in Atlanta, the Bears are just 2 games behind them with 5 games left to play. So you never know what's going to happen. And it's crazy. The Bears, earlier in the season, looked like they were having a fire sale, like they'd given up on the year. They got rid of Bostic, they got rid of Allen, and then all of a sudden their defense gets better. Of course, it was a really rainy, cold night, and that tends to put a damper on scoring, and that's kind of what we saw here in this game. But both defenses really playing well, although, only the 2 turnovers, and that was, of course, by the Packers. But they were holding the Bears to 3 and outs. They had 4 3 and outs by the Packers defense that they forced of Chicago. They held them to just 17 points, but the offense was only able to muster 13, and the only touchdown that the Packers did score was actually after that interception had been overturned due to the penalty, and that was by Porter, and then they end up with that touchdown, Rodgers to Lacy, and that was in the first quarter, and that was the only touchdown for the Packers in this game. It almost looked like Rodgers was going to do his best Brett Favre impersonation with the fourth quarter comeback there at the end. Of course, he got picked off by Porter for real that time, and then they did get the ball back. He got one more shot at it. They got all the way down there, all the way to the 8-yard line. It was pretty much as close as could be. Even that pass to Jones on third down, it was in his hands. He had it, but Porter knocked it out of his hands, and it was not a catch. It was not a touchdown. And then the game, it would come to a close moments later. Of course, the Bears would end this game with the ball after the Packers turned it over on downs. But in this game, Jay Cutler, he said his first win in Lambeau Field. He was 19 for 31, 200 passing yards, 1 touchdown. Jeremy Langford, 12 carries for 48 yards and a touchdown. He also had 1 catch for 5 yards, giving him 53 total yards on the game. Matt Forte made his return from the injury, and he had 15 carries for 44 yards. He also had 1 catch for 9 yards, giving him 53 total yards as well. So both Langford and Forte with 53 yards. Of course, Langford got that 1-yard touchdown run. Alshon Jeffrey, 7 catches for 90 yards. Wilson had 4 catches for 44 yards. Of course, Zach Miller, 2 catches for 10 yards, one of which was that touchdown. And for the Packers, Aaron Rodgers, 22 for 43, 202 passing yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. Eddie Lacy had 17 carries for 105 yards. He also had 4 catches for 34 yards, giving 139 yards on the day. He also had a catch for a touchdown, that 25-yard touchdown, the only offensive touchdown of the game for the Packers. So he had another big game for Lacy, and that is a bright spot for the Packers to see him producing, as he had been in somewhat of a slump, but he's looking good now. And Starks, 7 carries for 39 yards. Rodgers also had 33 yards rushing off of 4 carries. Randall Cobb had 6 receptions for 74 yards. Starks actually had 4 catches for 41 yards to give him 80 total yards on the game. And Ricardo Rodgers, 4 receptions for 30 yards. Of course, the fumble by Lacy, though, was that other turnover that the Bears forced, as they forced 2 turnovers in this game. We look at the kickers. Robbie Gould, 1 for 1 on the field goals, 2 for 2 on the extra points. Mason Crosby, 2 for 2 on the field goals, 1 for 1 on the extra points. Then we look at the defense for the Bears. Lamar Houston had a sack. Prazinski forced a fumble. Young had a sack as well. And Porter with the interception, as he was having one heck of a game. As Porter and Cutler ended up with the turkey legs after the game. She saw, I think it was Melissa Starks. She was trying to give him the football, but her hands are so small she couldn't pick up the football. They had to place it in her hand upside down. But for the Packers, Rollins had a sack. And then we look at the team stats. 23 first downs for the Packers, 17 first downs for the Bears. On third down, the Bears were 5 of 14, 35% converted. And the Packers just 3 of 11 converted on third down, just 27%. They went for it twice on fourth down, and they did not convert. And that would actually be their first and their last possessions of the game, as they turned the ball over on downs on their first possession of the game, and they turned the ball over on downs on their last possession of the game. Total net yards in this game, 365 for the Packers, 290 for the Bears. On the ground, the Packers netted 177, and the Bears netted 101. And through the air, the Bears netted 189. Cutler was sacked once for a loss of 11 yards, and the Packers netted 188 through the air, as Rodgers was sacked twice, losing a total of 14 yards. Let me look at the penalties in this game, and despite being penalized 12 times for 95 yards, the Bears still come away with the win. Usually if you have that many penalty yards, I mean, they were just calling the penalties left and right on Chicago, but it didn't make a difference. And the Packers had just 3 penalties for 38 yards. Of course, a penalty would lead to the Packers' only touchdown in this game. The Bears did have a fumble. They did not lose it. They recovered their only fumble, and the Packers fumbled 3 times, and they lost 1. So the ball was hard to keep a hold of. It was pretty slippery when wet. And so then we look at the red zone, and the Packers were 0 for 2 in the red zone, 0%, and that really was the difference in the game, among other things. There's a lot of things that really went the Bears' way, but that was the main factor right there, the red zone. Of course, the Packers ended the game in the red zone, turning the ball over on downs, and the Bears were 2 for 3 in the red zone, 66%. And the time of possession, 31 minutes and 12 seconds for the Bears, 28 minutes, 48 seconds for the Packers. So this is a real sloppy game here, raining down, all defense, not much offense in this game on either side. And the Bears come away with a win there in Lambeau Field as Brett Favre got inducted into that Ring of Fame. But I'll tell you, like I said, it was all defense in this game, and the Bears, even with all those penalties, their defense was still able to come through, and their secondary did a heck of a job, and they were getting after Rodgers as well, putting the pressure on him. And the Green Bay defense, they did a good job too. They were really shutting down the Bears offense. Not a lot of points in this game, only 30 total points in the game. And I thought the Packers would have put up 30 points by themselves heading into this game. We saw earlier on the first 2 games were kind of blowouts. They were pretty lopsided, and this game actually I thought would be a blowout. We saw Aaron Rodgers throw 5 touchdowns in the first half against the Bears in Lambeau Field last year, but here in this game with this weather, that really put a damper on the offense of both teams and really bolstered the defense. So it was a real muddy game. Of course, they got quite the irrigation system there in Lambeau Field, though, because it was coming down all day long, and you really couldn't tell it by just looking at the field necessarily. But let me know what you think in the comment section below. Definitely interested to read your thoughts and opinions. Thank you very much for listening. It is greatly appreciated. And I hope you're having a good day and you had a good week. And I hope you have a great weekend. And I hope you had a happy Thanksgiving and enjoyed all the sports.